Hey guys, I got a really cool build to show, and actually I did this build in 3.11. That was before Elementalist got changed, and the build was actually very popular, and it wasn't very expensive, but after that I guess more people realized how broken and how good this could be. So the build became very expensive, but that build was very satisfying, and eventually we now got Elementalist changes, Elementalist got reworked, so a couple of things changed for that build, so I wanted to revisit that build and see what's up. And another reason is because most of the items are very cheap right now for this build, and I'm not quite sure why. I guess people just got tired of it. So I'm gonna talk about what this build is, how everything works. I'm gonna compare the old Elementalist and with the new version. Now I was able to do Sirus 5. This is, by the way, was my first Sirus this league. I'm gonna be doing some more endgame bosses with this build after I post this video. I just wanted to kind of give you a guide and show you the changes, the differences from what it used to be. This build is very satisfying to map with. You got massive explosions from Inpulsa and Stormgift gloves, but this build is not all smooth sailing. It has surprisingly big issues with rituals. Like, I thought rituals are just gonna blow up and it's gonna be amazing, but it's kind of the opposite. The rituals are the biggest issue for this build. And I think the reason is because of how Herald of Thunder works in general. The Herald of Thunder just tries to strike the different target when it just struck. So if it does not one-shot the enemy, it just targets another one and another one and another one. And sometimes you get in a situation where you just get 30 enemies and the Herald just keeps striking a different target and doesn't kill anything, so you don't get any explosions. So it can be pretty sketchy with this build. And another thing with rituals, ritual monsters do not leave corpses, so it does not really synergize well with the Stormgift gloves. So you can't like proliferate shocks. So Impulsa, there's a trick, I'm gonna talk about that with the Impulsa and Stormgift gloves. And the better gloves for single target are Algor Mortis gloves, which do give a lot of damage. Now, the build does not have very good defensive layers. It does have decent. I do have fortify up almost all the time. I'm testing a new thing, the new unique belt, which allows me to get triple damage, which is supposed to be generic, and I'm not 100% sure that it actually is working. It's kind of hard to test it because lightning damage is, like, you know, from very low to very high. So it could be that I'm just hitting high lightning rolls instead of like triple damage. So it's kind of hard to say, but it should be, triple damage should be working with anything as long as it is a hit and not like a degen or ailment. So maybe to begin I should explain how Herald of Thunder works with this, and to those who have never did a build like that or heard about it. So basically, Herald of Thunder, normally it would only trigger lightning beams after you kill a shocked enemy. However, with the Storm Secret rings, you only need to shock an enemy. You just shock with anything. You shock an enemy and it just triggers the Herald thunderstorms. Also, these rings increase the frequency of those thunderstorms. But each time you strike an enemy with those thunderstorms, you're also taking 250 lightning damage to yourself. Also, new Elementalist makes it extremely easy to shock. The new Elementalist node called Shaper of Storms give you a 100% chance to shock with anything. All damage with hits can shock. So you can actually even shock enemies with Essence Drain as long as it hits the target. So this makes it extremely easy to continuously have the Herald happening. Herald of Thunder itself cannot inflict shocks. Same goes for Impulse explosions. It does not shock. Now, because I'm constantly taking damage because of Storm Secret rings, I can just add a bunch of cast and damage taken setups and just basically automate almost anything. Actually, you can automate everything and just flame dash into enemies and you will start the process. But I didn't go for that. I wanted more control. So I'm only casting Orb of Storm to trigger Elemental Overload. That's it. And to obviously trigger the shock. And after that, everything is automated. What's left is to just dodge things, try to not get hit too much. So I'm gonna show you how my older build looked like. So this is a POB from 3.11. That was during the the Harvest League, I believe, I had 1.1 million DPS, and that was with very budget items. I was actually using dual weapons, going even with the Fire Burst, which is not really needed anymore. A unique item that could fill this role is Agnor's South Staff, which does give +2 to all lighting spell skill gems. It gives you +5 to maximum lighting resistance, which mitigates the damage that you inflict yourself, and damage penetrates 20% lighting resistance. So this stuff is also actually pretty nice, and I believe I was using it at the start, but with the stuff the damage was a bit higher. So now the main difference, Elementalist looked a bit different. So previously I was actually using Agnostic, and I had kind of not really big mana pool. I had 2k unreserved mana, which was enough to kind of heal my life and to mitigate some of the damage. However, Elementalist back then had this node, 25% reduced mana reservation of Herald skills, and then you would take these skills, passive nodes, and that's how you could reserve only half of your mana on a 6-link Herald. So that is gone now. So remember, I had 1.1 million DPS, and the new build actually has 1.8 million DPS, almost 1.9 million DPS, and that's not counting the triple damage. But this time I cannot go mind over matter anymore, so actually going with the Corrupted Soul, which does give 20% of my maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. And also 50% of damage by passive energy shield, which is kind of important because it helps you mitigate or distribute the damage that you inflict to yourself. So all I have to do is, well, actually I have to do a couple of things. I can still use the staff, the Agnor South staff, which would be a bit less damage than what I have right now, but it would also mitigate the damage that I inflicted myself. Now to mitigate the damage, I'm basically getting Energy Leech, I'm getting Life Leech, and then I'm mitigating the damage with the Fortify, I'm mitigating with the Steel Skin, and also mitigating the damage with the new Elemental or Primal Aegis from Elementalist. Also, Elementalist now got a lot more damage, Now Elementalist kind of applies a super exposure. Normally exposure from Wave of Conviction is lowering enemy resistances by 25% of the exposure element. But with this Master of Discord, it adds another minus 25%. So I'm actually lowering enemy resistances by 50%. And Heart of Destruction now gives 50% more damage for 4 seconds every 8 seconds. So it's 4 second downtime. And also Shaper of Storms is much more smoother now. You can inflict shocks with basically any hits. And also it now has 25% more effect of lighting ailment you inflict with hits with if the highest damage type is lighting. The minimum shock is 15%, which is what's gonna be scaled by the more shock effect and increased shock effect. So Elementalist got more damage, as you can see, 1.8 million damage now. I also invested into this build more, but I want to bring an attention to the items. So the Stormgift gloves are very cheap. They are 5k, and you can get some nice implicit synthesize mod. Storm Secret, cheap as well, less than 10k. You're obviously gonna want to roll a decent one, close to 50% increased frequency. I got one for 45 and 49 frequency. And the last item is Calamitous Vision, which is what gives Lone Messenger, and this one is 15k, even less. The Lone Messenger gives you 100% more damage with hits from Herald, so it basically doubles your damage already. The aura skills are disabled, so you can't really use a typical aura skills like Wrath anymore. You can still, I believe, use Aspect of the Spider or something like that. Did I show Impulsa? Impulsa is also very cheap. Even a 5-link Impulsa is 25k. If you cannot get a 6-link by dropping one support, you can still get over 1.3 million DPS, and that's not counting the triple damage. Now the triple damage comes from the new Anguish belt, so gain brutal charge instead of endurance charges, and the minimum and maximum endurance charges are basically turned into brutal charges, and the brutal charge gives players have 3% chance to deal triple damage and 10% increased stun threshold per brutal charge, and I currently have 6 brutal charges, so I'm gaining 18% chance to deal triple damage, and it also increases my stun threshold by 60%, so it's very unlikely that I will ever get stunned. So the build also gives a decent chunk of maximum life. Now, like I said, I'm not entirely convinced that it actually is working for Heralds, but like I was able to defeat Sirus 5, all the Guardians, and yeah, I can't really tell. Sometimes it looks like it is working, is chunking. Sometimes the bosses just get chunked like instantly almost, and other times it's just like slowly draining their HP, but it's very consistent. Now, obviously, I also have Supercharge, which kind of mitigates the difference between the minimum and the maximum damage of lightning hits, which also is like an overall like 35% more DPS increase. As for the other items, I actually this time went with the Hale Negator. It's not that great, but I needed some way to recover energy shield, and initially I was planning on using energy shield on block. And by the way, I do have a block. I could easily cap my block with Rumin's Concoction because glancing blows, but I went for more damage shield instead. Yes, on block, because you cannot really block your own inflicted damage. Otherwise, it would be OP. You would be taking no damage and actually healing yourself. In fact, you can actually heal yourself, since half of the damage bypasses energy shield. So with 2 rings, I'm taking 500 lightning damage, but that is mitigated by lightning resistance. So in the end, I'm taking 125 lightning damage per hit, and I believe it's striking like over 7 times per second. So I'm taking like almost 1000 damage per second. However, only half of it goes into energy shield, because I do have energy leech and life leech. But I believe for energy leech, it's 10% of maximum energy leech is the limit how much energy leech you can leech per second. I'm able to leech on my current energy shield. I'm able to leech 230 ES per second, but I'm taking like 450 or something like that, or maybe even 500 ES per second damage. So I would need ideally around 4500 energy shield to kind of completely negate the lightning damage that I inflict. However, like I said, that's not an issue. I can mitigate that with the Primal Aegis from Elementalist. I also have the Steel Skin. The Primal Aegis, I currently have 3000 absorption, 3000 like what do you call it, effective HP for lightning hits. So as long as I have Primal Aegis, I take no damage, do no damage to myself. And also enemy's elemental damage does nothing, but it drains very fast. So once it drains, 4 seconds later it will instantly get back to full. So it's like once you lose it, you got 4-second window of like, let's say, weakness, and then after that you're taking no damage again from your own hits. Now the rituals, like I said, are kind of annoying, and I was constantly switching between Storm Gifts for clearing and Algor Mortis for bossing and rituals, because they don't leave corpses. So I guess I should have explained Inpulsa interaction and Storm Gift Gloves. So the Storm Gift Gloves, it says enemies you kill are shocked, and shocks you inflict spread to other enemies within a radius of 15. So you kill an enemy with Herald which does not shock, the enemy dies, the enemy then gets shocked because of the gloves, and spread that shock to other enemies. The enemy dies, shocks himself, shocks itself, shocks other enemies, and also does Impulsa explosion to other enemies, which then also die, proliferate that shock, and that's how you get a massive Impulsa explosions with the Storm Gift and well, Impulsa. But for single target, I do swap to Algor Mortis, which states enemies in your chilling areas take 34% increased lightning damage. This goes to 35, and this is like a more multiplier. This is the best in slot gloves for damage for Herald of Thunder, and you create chilling areas very easily. There are a couple options. You can use like Vortex, you can use Creeping Frost, but I chose to use Cold Snap because it have massive AoE. It does have cooldown, but you also generate frenzy charges randomly while killing enemies inside that chilling area. Looking at my notes, I forgot to mention one more thing. One of the most annoying things for this build is allies cannot die monster mode. That is just a nightmare. I'm gonna add some clips. If you meet that, it's basically a game of hit and run, and or maybe a cat and mouse game, where you just run around in circles around the monster pack or try to lure them away and separate them from the allies cannot die. Because the Herald of Thunder just keeps striking a different target each time, and you just pray that it strikes the right target. If not, then you just can't do anything. You can't do anything. Another thing, interactions with Hydrosphere. So Hydrosphere does not proc Herald of Thunder. You can drop Hydrosphere, you can shock it, but it will not proc Herald of Thunder. Another thing, you do not want Hydrosphere. Hydrosphere will eat your damage. The Herald of Thunder will strike Hydrosphere, and because of that you're not actually striking other targets to do the damage. So do not use Hydrosphere. The Hydrosphere will also not proc an additional time when Herald of Thunder strikes, because Herald of Thunder does not shock. Now, to go over my items, links, and passives. Another thing I forgot to mention. I am not sure how double damage and triple damage interacts. I know that if you got 100% chance to deal triple damage, then double damage does nothing. And you can verify that with the Skeleton Sword, which does always have triple damage. And if you get double damage, it does not increase their DPS, at least in PvP. So, but I'm thinking that if you got double damage and triple damage chances, imagine you strike a target and like you don't roll those chances, so you do the normal damage. Then the other time you strike the target and you do the triple damage. Then the other time you strike the target and you do the double damage. So I think that double damage could still help, and there's a focus mode, like a 20% chance to deal double damage while focus or something like that. This weapon, actually you can get a very similar outcome with like 10 Hale's weapon. So this is my weapon, and this is just a +1 weapon with just lightning damage. See, the damage is basically the same. So you can get a very cheap weapon. The spell damage does not affect it. The flat damage to spells does not affect it. You can also, by the way, verify that by equipping some item that does give elemental damage to spells, like this replica prism weave. If I put this on and look at the Herald of Thunder, the Herald of Thunder does not have any other than lightning damage. The prism weave does have increased elemental damage, that's why you see that the damage increases, but it does not add any other elements. So a weapon can be very simple and pretty cheap. So the shield gives +1 to lighting and then big increased lighting damage. It can also be elemental damage. You can also go for a more defensive shield, like recover energy shield on block or to maximum lighting resistance. Now for the helmet, like I said, I went with the Hale Negator. It recovers 3% life, up to 3% life and energy shield when you lose spirit charges, and you lose them when you take a savage hit, which is I believe 15% of the damage into life. And you gain 1 spirit charge per a visual affecting you, and I only have 3, which is not ideal, so I'm only recovering 9% of energy shield and life when I take a savage hit. Hale Negator 2 socket is pretty cheap. I believe I paid like 20 Hales or 30 Hales, something like that. The jewels I needed, so Abyss jewels are not really gonna give you damage at all, mostly, so what's left is just life, energy shield and resistances. Obviously you're also probably gonna want to get a jewel with onslaught on kill. You can get something like that with even lighting penetration implicit, life and onslaught on kill. The blind doesn't matter because I'm not really attacking. Next, Inpulsa. I actually managed to 6-link this Inpulsa, and I wouldn't say I was lucky, because I was trying to 6-link this Inpulsa since the start of the league, so 3 weeks. I was using it on my first characters and I managed to 6-link it. Next, gloves, like I said, Algor Mortis, and swap to Storm Gift for clearing. And inside the gloves I have like a simple setup, simple cast and damage taken setup, Wave of Conviction and Conductivity with Culling Strike. The Wave of Conviction applies to Culling Strike. And those gems are cheap, you don't need to be high level, so it's easy to swap gloves with gems inside them. The belt earns Anguish, I believe, is also very cheap. Yeah, it's like below 10 years. Rings, Storm Secret, you can actually even catalyst them for more like you're not gonna need lightning resistance for more like elemental damage, but it's very minuscule. Now the amulet is kind of the only thing that well, actually the second thing that I still want to improve other than weapon. The amulet can also be +1, but I needed Lightning Leech. You can get Lightning Leech on Cluster Jewel, but that I bought the jewel before this one, so didn't want to change the jewel again because it was already decent. And the amulet, you want Lightning Leech, you want +1 to lighting skill gems if possible, if you can afford that, and then whatever else you need. Anointment Command of Steel, because I'm getting fed 66 attack block without any flask, so I'm getting 66% increased damage generic. And now finally the boots. The boots can also be +1 to maximum endurance charge, which It's probably gonna be a bit expensive. I believe I paid 1 exalt for these boots, and it's kind of difficult to get the boots with life, movement speed, and endurance charge for less than a couple exalts. So the boots, you don't need boots like that. You can actually get similar outcome. Well, not really similar, but you can just use rare boots and craft increased effect of non-damaging ailments, which is gonna boost your shock effect, which is gonna increase the damage enemies take when we get shocked. And that's also gonna be boosted by 25% more lighting ailment effect from Elementalist. If I were to craft this, I would gain around 3% more damage if I would hit 20% increase effect. So the boots can also be pretty cheap as long as you get enough resistances, movement speed, and obviously life. Energy shield would also be very nice. Now for flask, I chose to use granite to mitigate physical damage a bit more. Also using wise oak, and sulfur gives generic damage and some regen. But instead of like wise oak, you could use like a Rumis concoction and cap your attack block and get the spell block to like 60 or something. Now for the gems. For the gems, I'm using Herald of Thunder linked with Hypothermia, Elemental Focus, Idle Lighting, Awaken Idle Lighting, but this is only level 1, so it's equal to level 20 normal Idle Lighting, then Lighting Penetration and Energy Leech. So since I'm constantly doing damage to myself, I'm basically almost always leeching Energy Shield. There are some periods where I'm not, and Hypothermia is a conditional thing. You need to... As soon as you start hitting the target, the boss, it will trigger cast when damage taken with Cold Snap, and that will enable Hypothermia. Then in the weapon I got cast when damage taken, Desecrate, and Cold Snap. I'm gonna explain why Desecrate. Cold Snap, in the helmet just Flame Dash and Steel Skin. Steel Skin is on my left click. In the shield I got Orb of Storm linked to increase critical strikes, and Arcane Surge is not needed, but it does give a bit more mana regen. Orb of Storms is only to proc Elemental Overload, because you need to crit. You can actually automate Orb of Storm, but I chose to use like a manual cast to have a bit more control. In the gloves I have another cast and damage taken with Wave of Conviction, Conductivity and Culling Strike. This basically applies super exposure from Wave of Conviction, and it does lightning damage the most because Herald does give flat damage to spells. In the boots I have Vigil Strike linked to General's Cry. I also linked to Blind and Increased Duration, but here's the trick, and props to Yoji. Yoji made a video about this method. What you need is very simple. You need the Vigil Jewel. You socket it where it can support Strength Threshold. Basically, Vigil Strike fortifies you and nearby allies for 12 seconds. However, that's a cool thing. Vigil Strike can be linked with General's Cry. If there are corpses, and that's why I said I need this crit to one of the cast and damage taken. When there are corpses and when you click General's Cry, it creates mirages, or whatever they are called. And those mirages run to an enemy, hit them with Vigil Strike, with Vigil Strike, and grants you Fortify. And that Fortify duration is actually around 30 seconds with no investment. The increased duration is not for Fortify, but just to make those mirages last longer. You do need a melee weapon, so no Vans, as long as it is melee weapon and not Vans. Then you basically just click it once in a while, they run, they give you Fortify, and for 30 seconds you don't need to worry about Fortify again. That's why this is amazing. Again, props to Yoji. Now the passive 3. For the leveling, I would recommend you to play with like Ball Lighting or something else until 68 when you can put on Inpulsa, because running Herald of Thunder without Inpulsa was not a pleasant experience. It was not. Because Herald just strikes one target at a time and just was not pleasant at all. And also I was only using one Storm Secret Ring. Don't just put on 2, because you will probably do too much damage to yourself too early. You need to build up more Energy Shield and get the Corrupted Soul before you can use the second Storm Secret Ring. As always, I'm gonna leave Baffle Building Importicon in the video description. Maybe I'm not gonna explain everything, but Cluster Jewel event for this spot, going for the Supercharge and whatever else you can get. Ideally, you would want Doryani's Lessons, which does give Elemental Leech, and then you can actually go for the medium jewels. You do want Enduring Composure, because you hit yourself basically, and then you generate endurance charges every second. I picked some Energy Shield nodes. to increase my energy shield, but yeah, it's still not enough. And then I actually decided to go down here to pick up another endurance charge. So I went with the intuitive leap because this is already level 92 and I did not have enough points to like path through all of these. But intuitive leap allows you to take stamina, +1 endurance charge, big life node, big life node. And as an elementalist, first I took Shaper of Storms, which allows to shock and well gives you damage because enemies are shocked, taking more damage. And then I believe I went with the Hard Destruction, and then from Uberlab took the Bastion of Elements, but you may want to grab Bastion of Elements early on and take Heart of Destruction later to get like the final damage multiplier. Socket Vigil Jewel in here, and then the Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel with the Doryani's name. Name of Doryani basically, which is gonna give you Corrupted Soul, which I believe was also a bit pricey, like 30 plus years. The Intuitively is another like 30. So the build, while it is not expensive, but there are many items that like 30 here's here, 30 here's here, 50 here's here, another Exile there, and it can all add up. I'm not sure how much I spent, like if you don't count Inpulsa, it's probably like, I don't know, 4 Exalts on items, but I believe my items are kind of decently fine-tuned, wouldn't say like extremely fine-tuned. By the way, the triple damage is not calculated in path of building from the build, so 18% chance to deal triple damage, if I'm not mistaken, gives you 36% more damage, right? Because 18% chance to deal double damage would be, well, 18% more damage, right? So if you double that, it would be 36% more damage. So you would actually have around 2.5 million DPS. There you go. A very cool build, a very satisfying to play with. I'm probably gonna be doing more endgame bosses with this build because I just keep playing it. I just want more and more. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.